Welcome, 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 everybody. Thank you so much for coming out tonight, and we're glad it's not the rainy evening it was yesterday. I'd like to think we're in a room full of friends, and it's really great to see everyone here as we embark on this reflection and this journey with Color Congress. I'm John Cesare Goff, pronouns he, him. I'm a program officer for the Creativity and Free Expression program at Ford Foundation, where I work on the Just Films portfolio. I would like to acknowledge that here in Manhattan, New York, it's the homeland of the Lenape, who were violently displaced as a result of European settler colonialism over the course of 400 years, as well as the forced migration of many peoples who now call this land home. So again, it's a privilege to stand before you, and it's even more of a privilege to witness the past 2 years of the work that the Color Congress has done. Its membership has flourished, growing to over 400 organizations across the United States and U.S. island nations. This network of organizations is more than a mere collection of entities. It is a movement dedicated to crafting a new narrative, one that reflects the richness and diversity of our communities. In the words of James Baldwin, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. So these words encapsulate the essence of the Color Congress ecosystem, a collective endeavor to confront systemic inequalities and effect meaningful change. So as we delve into the findings of this report, we'll be confronted with a sobering reality that despite their remarkable impact, these organizations operate on shoestring budgets with little to no support for sustainability or growth. And despite all of that, they serve over 15,000 documentary filmmakers, 10,000 documentary film professionals, and reaching an audience of over 20 million individuals. So that is a testament to their unwavering dedication and determination for this work. Amidst these challenges, there is hope. The members of Color Congress have forged bonds of solidarity, resilience, and shared purpose. Together, they are laying the groundwork for a reimagined documentary landscape, one that is truly inclusive, equitable, and just. Janetta B. Cole often says if you're not outraged, you're not paying attention. So today, I hope we all pay attention, even as we gather to acknowledge the achievements of the Color Congress ecosystem. We must reaffirm our commitment to community, to solidarity, and to the pursuit of a more just and equitable future for all. And as a philanthropic partner, the Ford Foundation remains steadfast in its commitment to supporting initiatives like Color Congress through programs like Just Films and our continued collaboration with organizations that prioritize equity, racial, gender, and disability justice and inclusion. We will continue to work alongside you to amplify marginalized voices, advance social justice narratives, and foster an inclusive documentary landscape. So I would like to invite my colleague, Lauren Pabst, Senior Programmer Officer at MacArthur.
Thank you so much, John. Hi, good afternoon. I'm Lauren Pabst, Senior Program Officer for Journalism and Media at MacArthur, and it is such an honor to be here today with you celebrating the release of the groundbreaking report, The People of Color Documentary Ecosystem, Engines for a New American Narrative from Color Congress. The MacArthur Foundation supports journalism and media with the goal of strengthening democracy and building a more equitable future by informing, engaging, and activating Americans through deep investments in just and inclusive news and narratives. MacArthur's newest program is our Big Bet in Local News, established in 2023, focused on revitalizing local news to better inform communities and strengthen American democracy. This is part of a national collaborative known as Press Forward, aimed at galvanizing dramatically more resources for local news from national and local philanthropy. But MacArthur's media funding dates back more than 40 years and is one of our longest running areas of focus. It began with support for independent documentaries. We have deep roots in this field, and as we've seen it change over the decades, we have adapted our strategies for funding with the goal of helping diversify and expand who gets to tell these powerful stories. Having the privilege to work across journalism and documentary fields at this moment of extreme upheaval and tremendous possibility, I see that there are many parallels between the work of local journalism and documentary film organizations of the type that Color Congress supports. In communities across the country, local news organizations, many of them led by people of color, are reimagining journalism as a service and creating new forms of storytelling that reach communities that are most impacted by an issue, but not often thought of as consumers of news about these issues. Whether it's training and paying members of the public to cover community meetings, or communicating directly with residents through text messages or WhatsApp. Color Congress members, as the report showcases, are also creating opportunities for the diverse communities they serve to connect with documentary film as both the filmmaker and the audience for this work, not only the subjects. As the report states, quote, whether an organization programs storytelling that heals a wounded community, activates an empowered one, or both, they recognize communities of color as agents of change in their own lives, their communities, and our nation. And in the case of both journalism and the people of color documentary ecosystem, we are also reminded that this work has deep historical roots as well. URL Media, which stands for Uplift, Respect, Love, one of the first grantees of MacArthur's New Local News Initiative, supports Black and Brown news media organizations by sharing content, distribution, and other resources. Last month at the Knight Media Forum, URL Media co-founder Asmitra Khalida reminded the audience that the idea of the press operating in service of communities of color is nothing new, invoking Frederick Douglass, whose newspapers helped readers escape enslavement, find health care, and search ads to reunite with loved ones. Likewise, Color Congress reminds us that powerful form social issue documentary traces its roots to the 1960s, inspired by the Third Cinema movement, as with its member Third World Newsreel, that demands that documentary be used in service of empowerment and to reflect realities of people in Asia, Africa, Latin America, their diasporas, and indigenous communities around the world. Local news and documentary are sometimes thought of as, by definition, removed from communities, in worst case, extracting from and harming them. But understanding the way that these media forms are wielded by, in service of, and in deep engagement with communities of color is a powerful and necessary reframing, one that helps us understand how the stories we tell is directly connected to achieving the promise of our democracy. Through our support for Color Congress, we have learned the truly unique value of its work, that it is not merely about efficiency in regranting funds to more organizations than we would be able to support directly, but about providing culturally responsive, multifaceted support and collective power building that ensure the work of its members and the role they play in changing narratives is correctly valued and able to flourish. And now it is my pleasure to turn it over to the wonderful Robert Smith III, Senior Program Officer for the Thriving Cultures Foundation, program at the Surdna Foundation.
How's everyone doing? How's everyone doing? All right, I just want to say, my name is Robert Smith, he, him pronouns, Senior Program Officer for Thriving Cultures at the Surdna Foundation down the street here in New York. And it's an honor to be here to support and celebrate the release of this report, the beautiful writing and work of Sahar and Sonia and everything they do at Color Congress. All right. So from absorbing American history through the words of Black activists in Eyes on the Prize, as a kid growing up in Florida, to deepening my solidarity with Black trans women through last year's poignant films, The Stroll and Kokomo City. Documentaries have always shaped how I see the world. These nonfiction films, along with many others, play no small part in my commitment to collective action, bodily autonomy, and the power of storytelling to change hearts and minds. And boy, do we need to change hearts and minds in order to maintain and expand our movement's hard-fought victories. Surely I don't need to remind anyone in this room of the threats we face as we grapple with the backlash against the gains in the power, visibility, and influence of communities of color. Frontline and people of color-led movements and organizations are bearing the brunt as they are the most vulnerable to legal challenges and not infrequently violence, intimidation, and dehumanization. But there's another important threat for us to neutralize in this moment: our own fear as philanthropic leaders. It's been striking to watch the retreat from the bold proclamations of 2020 over the last 4 years at the very moment when so much is at stake. And whatever happens after the dust settles in November, our nonfiction filmmakers and our movements will lead us into the future. In order for them to do their best work, we have to do our best work as funders. So with that in mind, I want us to do a quick imagination exercise. So if you will close your eyes for a moment and imagine your most beloved freedom fighter or community organizer, the most committed filmmaker you know, or the boldest documentary you've ever seen. Do you have that person, that film in your mind yet?
Yes.
Thank you. A good student. Okay, open your eyes. So with that person or group of people or film in your mind, how might you as an individual, my question to you is, how might you as an individual, working at whatever location of power you find yourself in, at whatever institution you find yourself at, channel the bravery and the strategic risks of the social movements, of the person you thought about, of the social movements and filmmakers in our current moment, and do everything that you can to support and protect frontline and POC-led organizations. So I hope that leaves you with a bit of a challenge as you move around the reception, greet your friends. Let's hold these individuals in our hearts and channel their bravery. So as the Color Congress report makes clear, it's going to take a village, or in their words, an ecosystem, of aligned and coordinated folks to get us to our goals. And I'm asking each of you funders in the room to join us. So the Cerna Foundation is proud to join our colleagues at Ford, MacArthur, the Perspective Fund, and anyone I may have missed, in support of the critical work of Color Congress. You know, we just did this a few months ago, so it's never too late to join. The Thriving Cultures program that I lead and my colleagues on the communications team made our first grant to Color Congress out of a recognition that we hadn't done enough in the nonfiction film space, that we were committed to narrative change, committed to cultural strategy, had been moving resources to think about conventional entertainment to popular culture, and we wanted to do more in recognition that the nonfiction space is also a vital lever for the racially just communities that we work so hard to resource. And I'm making all of you a promise, if there are any funders unsure about how to move bold, POC-led work, if you're feeling have any anxiety about how to move that through your institution, I will happily meet you over a cocktail or a coffee to share strategy and stories about how we got it done at Cerna Foundation. So with that, I would like to introduce a short film featuring the inaugural national convening of the Color Congress. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Atlanta. I'm so happy to see you.
I believe that the work that y'all are doing and the Color Congress is doing is so fundamental. We cannot do it alone. And you all gathering here today is a reflection of the possibility of not doing it alone. We believe in collectivity. We believe in working across difference. It is so, so, so very important.
We want to design something that is really radical and aspirational, something more beautiful than just base equity, where we all have the conditions necessary to actually thrive. And then we wanted to tangibly identify the prototypes of that future, also known as like the first steps that we need to get to this world. In other words, this isn't a word, but I like to call it thrival instead of survival.
Imagine what's possible when we organize ourselves as cultural workers and understand our power as change makers, because I think the other thing that the colonial worldview has taught us is that as artists, we're just creators. We don't have the power to change the world. But we actually do, because what speaks to people's heart is culture. And in culture, we change worldview.
So how do we become kin? How do we do this work? We're honest about our kinship. We're honest about the ways that we have been ripped apart from one another. We're honest about the ways that our stories have been pushed to the margins, and now we want to bring them together.
We are living in the era of extreme vertical integration. Storytellers are paying for corporations to gain market dominance. I believe that we can and we must build the ecosystem we want from the ground up. It is undeniable. There is space, there is audience, there is revenue. You all are making the space for these films. I believe in the creativity in this room to power collective, structural, and cultural change.
Hey, everyone. Welcome. Hey, I see some new folks back there. It's nice to see you. Tracy, Yava, thanks for coming.
It does feel like a wedding.
It does. What you just saw was, like Robert said, the national convening that took place this past September. It was the first time our members got to meet each other in person. And so we think that gives you a really good insight and glimpse into the energy of the Color Congress membership, the enthusiasm and the vision they hold. So we wanted to show that as an introduction to our members. My name is Sahar Driver. For those of you who don't know, this is Sonia Childress. We are both the co-founders and co-executive directors of Color Congress. What a great crowd. We're not filmmakers ourselves, as many of you know, but we have been working in the documentary field for about 15 to 20 years as impact strategists, both independently and also with mainstay organizations in the documentary field, like Firelight Media, where Sonia worked for over 10 years, Active Voice, where Sonia and I both worked, and with partnering with lots of organizations as well, like Doc Society and Working Film. So this is our community, this is our space. And we're really excited to share why we've turned our attention to this ecosystem of people of color led and serving documentary organizations. And so we're gonna give you a glimpse into this report that feels a bit like a coming out party. But before we do, I do want to really thank a few really important people in this room. I want to thank the Ford Foundation for hosting this event. In particular, I want to thank Chiwei Yang, who I don't see right now. Oh yeah, there you are. And John Cesare Goff. Literally, they are our fiercest champions, Color Congress would literally not exist without their advocacy. Chi Wei actually named Color Congress. It was just an idea, and I ran with it. I also want to thank our 2 other founding funders who've also been fierce, fierce champions who've been on our side from the beginning. MacArthur Foundation, who you just heard from, Lauren Pabst. Kathy M., I'm not sure if Kathy's here. Jacob Taylor, who is here, I don't see where he is. Hiding. Abby Lord from the Perspective Fund. Also, like I said, thank you so much for your support and believing in this ecosystem alongside us. We also want to thank some of our newest champions, Robert Smith III, who you just heard from, Maida Lynn from Facet, Rachel Herzing from Wellspring, Tracy Rector from Neotero, who I'm not sure is here yet, Becky Lichtenfeld from Inmot, and Wendy Ettinger, who's also in our corner. Thank you all for your support. Sonia is going to share a bit about the genesis for the report.
So I'm so excited about being in this room. It feels like it's a family reunion, yeah? So many of us know each other so well for so many years of work in this sector. So this is a really exciting day, and I'm excited to continue the conversation when we move into the reception. But many of you, not all of you, but many of you are aware of the origin story. Can you all hear me in the back? Of the origin story for Color Congress, but for those of you who haven't heard it, I'm just going to give you a quick overview. Sahar and I launched the Color Congress at a virtual event at Sundance in 2022. We launched as a new intermediary in the documentary sector, only the second intermediary outside of IDA, and the only one focused on organizations, and only one focused specifically on people of color. And we organized ourselves and launched as an organization to do 4 things: to fund people of color-led and serving organizations, to support them beyond the check, to connect them to one another, and to champion their work publicly. Our intervention was data-driven, and it was informed largely by 2 reports, the most important of which was Beyond Inclusion, which was a report that Sahar, some research that Sahar did on behalf of the Ford Foundation. Again, this was Chi Wei's idea here, a really brilliant idea, which was to offer the field the first landscape scan of organizations across the United States that serve documentary filmmakers of color. But what her research unearthed was that there was a subset of back in 2019, about 90 organizations that were people of color led and people of color serving, and that these organizations were playing a really unique role in the professional careers of filmmakers of color and a unique role with audiences of color. And what held them all together was that they were all essentially chronically underfunded, and they were largely disconnected from one another. The second report is The Lens Reflected, which was a report that was not commissioned, but it was resourced by Ford, MacArthur, and the Perspective Fund, and it was conducted by the team at CMSI under Katie's leadership. The Lens Reflected demonstrated that despite increased access and interest in the documentary form in the golden/commercial /streaming age of documentaries, people of color still struggle to find a foothold in front of the camera and, most importantly, behind the camera. So as we launched the organization 2 years ago, and in the last 2 years, we've been in conversations with lots of folks across philanthropy, across the commercial sector, to try to make the case for the work and to talk to our colleagues about this ecosystem. And we were confronted with a number of really good questions, the simplest of which are, who are these organizations? Who do they serve? Where are they located? What's their relationship to the documentary form and to the documentary field? The thornier questions were, how could we possibly fund 90-plus organizations when the budget sizes we are looking at to fund for individual films is getting higher and higher, and we can barely do that? That's one question. The second question was, if these organizations are so dope and vital, as you two ladies keep saying, why is it that we look at the list of 90, 100 organizations on your website and we know about 20 of them, if they're so vital? Good questions. And 2 years and 100 member organizations later, we have the data and the case studies to answer those questions. That is the genesis of this report. This report is answering the questions of who are these organizations, who do they serve, what is their relationship to the documentary form, what are they doing that's unique and different to their counterpart organizations, and why is their work still so under-resourced, and why have they been so disconnected and undervalued? So we present this report as a window into what we believe is an ecosystem in ascension, in a field that is in great transition. There's one way to look at these organizations, that is that they are the drivers of diversity in the documentary sector. We think that's a bit reductive. We see them doing a lot more than that. These organizations create necessary hubs for politically engaged nonfiction work to be funded, produced, seen, discussed, platformed, and instrumentalized in service of narrative change and of community healing and community cohesion. They are the lifeline for the documentarians of color they serve. They are trusted curators for the audiences and communities who they focus on, who they hold themselves accountable to. Because so many of these organizations hold themselves accountable to those filmmakers, to those audiences and those communities, they are invisible to the rest of the industry. This is a coming out party not for Color Congress. We see this as a coming out party for the ecosystem. And so Sahar is going to walk you through some data around that ecosystem.
So the report draws on a number of different things. It draws on member enrollment data that we collect when organizations come to us to become a member. It's based on 63% of our membership also submitted member surveys. And it also consists of our observations of private conversations during our meetups every month, during the national convening, one-on-one conversations that we have with our members and our grantees, as well as basically our observations on all of that. So all of that has given us really clear insight into how this ecosystem moves, what they do, and where they are. So I want to give you a bit of a peek. So just over half of our members have a national reach. The rest of them have a discrete focus on different regions or localities across the US and the US islands. Of course, there's a density of organizations in Los Angeles, but also all across the state outside of media centers, as far north as Washington and as far west as Colorado. We have a density of organizations on the East Coast as well, here in New York City, of course, but across the state as well, and in New England. We have members throughout the Southeast, including Arkansas, Louisiana, North Carolina, and Georgia. We have members across Texas. We have members in the Midwest with a density in and around Chicago. And we have members in the Caribbean with a density in Puerto Rico, as well as the Pacific Islands serving the Hawaiian Islands, Guam, and the Northern Mariana Islands. Similarly, just over half of our members serve multiple identity communities, and the rest have a really discrete focus on specific identity communities. Of those that have a specific identity focus, those that are most served are Black, African, and African American, followed by Latinx, Latine. Other identities that are supported by our member organizations include Indigenous, Pacific Islander, Asian, Arab, Middle Eastern, but also people who identify as Caribbean, as Southern, as Muslim, as women and non-binary, queer, undocumented, and disabled. About a third of our organizations, our members, are artist support organizations. A third focus on disseminating the work of filmmakers and are audience-facing. And another third are a mix of networks and collectives, organizations that offer funding or have a specific and discrete advocacy in the documentary field. The oldest organization was founded 50 years ago. The newest was founded a year ago. and the largest percentage of organizations formed in the 2010s. The majority of our members are founder-led. And of those founders, 94% identify as filmmakers. In other words, these are people who themselves faced challenges in the field and designed an intervention and built an organization to address that challenge so that other filmmakers like themselves don't have to have that experience. They are passionate people who are committed to the communities that they serve, and while they're not resourced well, they are foundational to their peers and to the communities that they serve. As an aside, most of the founders identify as women. For example, Yvonne Welbin, who many in this room know. She chronicled the history of African-American lesbian media makers in the US in her 2003 doc, Sisters in Cinema. Then she wrote a book on the topic in 2018, and soon she's going to break ground on a new media center in the south side of Chicago to continue offering support to more media makers of color. And that's just the latest chapter in a 27-year history of her organization named Sisters in Cinema. Like Yvonne, the leaders who helm the organizations in our ecosystem are world builders, they're visionaries, they're organizers, and they're blazing paths for other filmmakers like themselves. But this work, like Sonia said, has largely not been visible to the broader field beyond the discrete communities that they serve. It's either deemed too discrete and not valued to the same degree, and so it's not supported and funded to the degree that it deserves. A quarter of our members operate with a budget that is less than $50,000 a year. And so it's not a surprise that 17% of our members reported to us that they have no full-time or even part-time paid staff. In other words, these members are literally funneling any resources that they bring in right back out to their communities through programming and offerings. Many organizations in our membership are fiscally sponsored, and the data is even more striking for them. 75% of the fiscally sponsored organizations in our membership have 0 paid full-time staff. Again, this not only speaks to the commitment of these organizations to the communities that they serve, but it also underscores their resourcefulness and their undercompensated field building work. And despite that, their collective impact has been really significant. As John mentioned, we learned that last year, our membership collectively served over 15,000 documentary filmmakers, over 10,000 documentary film professionals, and they reached over 20 million audience members. They are literally some of the most committed leaders in this field who deeply care about documentary, who deeply care about uplifting stories by and for communities of color, and they see urgency in this work that they do, and against all odds are finding innovative ways to continue offering support despite not being funded. These are not the people that we want to see burning out. And now a newly formed ecosystem that is organized and is in connection with one another, they're beginning to articulate their vision for the future of the field to address shared challenges and collective ambitions that they have. At the national convening, what you just witnessed, they really began to articulate what that vision is and narrow down to what their priorities would be to achieve that a vision for the future of a field that is inclusive of POC voices and power. And these are the 5 priorities that they identified. They want to design solutions to a broken distribution system that often fails filmmakers and the communities that they serve. They want to collectivize essential resources that address the needs they share, like marketing and accessibility, and that includes fundraising. They want to build greater access to funding to strengthen their own organizations, but they also want to share that access to support the broader ecosystem that they're a part of. They want to operate a collectively owned retreat space that allows their communities to access care and rest and creative independence. And they want to share publicly what they know about the power of documentary and its relationship to the communities of color that they serve, and how their organizations are strengthening that capacity. Following an 8-month-long collective decision-making process to determine which of these 5 they wanted to prioritize in 2024 and fund through the Field Building Fund, which is our participatory fund that's member-driven, they landed on that first one. They want to start developing infrastructure for a collective marketing experiment around films that are supported through this ecosystem. They believe that this experiment is going to create an important foundation, audience data, new learnings, partnerships, and a process for future work that's going to collectively address the distribution crisis that our broader field is in at the moment. So Sonia's going to share a few more observations drawing on this data.
Whew. Good job. She did fantastic. Yes. Work wife. So I don't have to. We're all friends here. This is the choir that we like to sing in front of and with. There are a few beyond the data points. We think there are a few stories that the data tells. And one is that we all, I imagine we're all in agreement. We believe that the documentary form is powerful. We think it is uniquely powerful in the hands of people of color. We know that this form has a long history as a mouthpiece for social justice movements. We know it does a really good job of correcting historical narratives, recalibrating those narratives, correcting disinformation, and adding nuance and complexity to complex contemporary social issues. We also know that despite waning trust in journalism and media in our society, the documentary form continues to be a trusted medium, especially on storytelling around science, around racial justice, thanks to the ITVS study, and climate, where it is twice as influential as the voices of celebrities in social media, as found by a recent Reuters study at Oxford. Our membership's work shows that documentary holds a unique power for people of color, whose stories have typically been told by folks outside of the communities. But our members ensure that folks of color are behind the camera, telling stories that focus on issues that are personal to them, that they have proximity to, and stories that are on their own terms. We know that our members provide cultural, creative, and political homes for politically engaged filmmakers of color to both think critically about the stories they tell, how they tell them, and what the impact those stories will have on their communities and the broader society. They create spaces for these communities to then watch and engage with powerful nonfiction work to expand their aesthetic tastes and palettes beyond what they thought they were going to like, and strengthen their political sensibilities, and provide bridges from their personal experiences to communities who maybe they didn't realize they were allied with.
So when we say that we think most filmmakers of color will make their way through one or more of the organizations in this ecosystem at some point in their careers, we think of Seth Hernandez. Yeah. Seth was trained in filmmaking by Visual Communications, an AAPI media center based in LA. Then they were trained in impact production at Firelight Media, a national filmmaker support organization that many of you know about, based here in New York City. Then Seth found peers as a member of the Asian American Documentary Network, ADOC. Grace Lee's here as well. Then co-founded the Undocumented Filmmakers Collective, which has advocated for undocumented filmmakers and that's urged artist support organizations to remove barriers to increase access for undocumented filmmakers to access grants. Seth then leveraged this network to produce a new film, their first feature-length film, Unseen, which introduced new aesthetic and distribution strategies with the help of another one of our member organizations, Axis Lab, an organization that supports disabled filmmakers of color, so that the film could reach undocumented and disabled audiences that match the protagonist in the film. Seth's film, by the way, was just awarded the Truer Than Fiction Award at Film Independent Spirit Awards. I see some nods. You all have been following their work. That's the role that this ecosystem plays in the lives and careers of these member organizations. They provide multiple opportunities for filmmakers to receive specific kinds of support that relate to the intersectional identities that they all hold.
So another finding is that we find that the people of color documentary ecosystem holds an expansive definition of impact and of success. Historically, documentary impact, the field that we come from, has been about changing hearts and minds, important work for sure. But in the hands of folks of color, and not to essentialize all people of color, but in the hands of folks of color, documentary impact often begins with the way that the filmmaking impacts the filmmaker first. Meaning that the filmmaking process itself can be a healing and empowering process. Then that healing and empowerment goes to the audience and the communities that that film reaches. And then in the hands of folks of color, often people of color are centered as agents of change, not subjects of history or victims of powerful forces. Filmmakers of color, not to essentialize, but often make films about issues they are personally close to. So the stories that they tell are often deeply personal and come from experience, even if there's a universal frame. As a result, this storytelling is nuanced, it's complex, and it cuts through the kinds of assumptions and misconceptions and stereotypes that can make it into stories made by people who are further from the issues or further from those communities, or by people who are trying to make films for mass audiences, which we all know mass audiences is often a euphemism for the peculiar tastes of tastemakers and gatekeepers, storytelling that is more comfortable to them. But storytelling by and for people of color, which is largely the kind of work that moves through this ecosystem, more accurately reflects the lived experiences of folks of color. And so it's powerful precisely because of its complexity and specificity. That storytelling, because people know who's behind the camera is speaking from a personal place, it fosters a different kind of trust, and it resonates both within that community on screen and beyond that community on screen. We believe storytelling like this can uphold and contribute to broader narratives, either narratives that need to be challenged or uplifted, and it can create a pathway to the kind of progressive advocacy and policy making that we know is an important part of cultural strategy work.
So our own field of documentary impact that Sonia and I have dedicated many years of our careers to tends to have a methodology that focuses on the singular impact of a specific film, which is particularly effective when it's directed at discrete challenges that can be addressed with a specific or singular direct action. But many of us understand that filmmakers of color tend to train their cameras on systemic and entrenched issues like racism, sexism, and homophobia that can't be addressed with a single film isn't sufficient. And it certainly can't be addressed over a 12-month grant period. But a chorus of filmmakers of color telling stories that illustrate power dynamics and that indict power holders can really increase understanding and activate communities over time. So whereas impact is typically directed at a single film, we see great narrative power and potential at the ecosystem level. The organizations that support these filmmakers and the audiences that they serve, what they're doing is building trust and relationships with them. And they prioritize transparency, ethics, and accountability with those communities that they serve. And so those relationships are deep and they're not transactional. Because they're community rooted and because they work at the level of relationships, we think that this is a ground-up strategy that's particularly durable. The communities that they serve return to the organizations in our membership regularly for film festivals and film screenings, for workshops and panel discussions. By connecting these organizations that serve the bulk of filmmakers of color in this country, we think that we're building a narrative infrastructure that speaks effectively to and across communities of color. We see this as a long-term strategy and a grassroots complement to important pop culture strategies that prioritize reach and scale, but require partnerships with industry players that can impose curatorial censorship based on commercial interests. But we think that in tandem, these two strategies can be particularly powerful. We also see great power with this newly connected ecosystem in its ability, connected, their impact is exponential, and as decentralized networks, they can and do mobilize for change, and we find that to be very exciting. So through relationship building and solidarity work, Color Congress is developing a really powerful and interconnected network of POC documentary organizations that are better able to learn from one another about our respective communities and begin to align on narratives that we may want to advance together.
This is where you come in. You guys ready? This isn't just a coming out of Color Congress or of the ecosystem. This is a call to action. There are 3 ways that we think our field can bolster this ecosystem and the important work that's happening within the ecosystem. We know that we've been operating behind closed doors for the last 2 years. We are going to continue to do that as the leaders build trust among one another and build shared analysis and shared goals and objectives. When we have public events, that's when an idea is either fully baked or ready to be engaged with. But what we're sharing in this moment now is what we're asking folks to consider in the midst of this organization building its power. We often get asked, what can we do to help this ecosystem? The first one would be funding. The primary obstacle facing our member organizations, no surprise here, is a lack of financial stability. The ways that we as the Color Congress are addressing that is threefold. First, at the end of the report, which hopefully you'll have a chance to look through on your own time, we've included a detailed directory. You can click through any of the organizations' names to find out more specific details around who they serve, where they serve them, regional focus, identity focus. That information is going to be available as you open up and read this report. It is password protected. We want to be conscientious of who's looking for that information. The second is we have an organizational grant program. It's an unrestricted grant program. Currently, it's biennial. We deliver about $1.35 million to about 17 organizations in $90,000 unrestricted grants. We want to continue to do that because funding is really key. But the third is we have another member-directed fund. We call it the Field Building Fund. That is a fund that resources our members' collective needs or collective ambitions. They vote on this. It has to be something that serves and benefits the entire ecosystem. We currently have funding to offer a $300,000 fund every year, but their bold ideas will not cover the implementation of their bold ideas. So we encourage folks to resource that. That is their experimentation fund. We really encourage funders in the room, if they aren't interested in Color Congress, resource first the organizations. Learn more about the 100 plus organizations in our membership. If they fall within your grant area, your portfolio, your region, your identity focus, we hope that you can learn more about them and resource them directly. If not, we do have the 2 funds that resource our ecosystem, and we're happy to support there. The second ask is that we support this ecosystem. Clearly, our members need funding, but we know that money is not enough. They also need tools, they need training and support to succeed. In our first year of our field building fund, we collectively produced a list of interventions that our members told us they would need to strengthen their organizations, and we delivered technical assistance resources so they would get that support. We quickly learned after that round of funding that that was in some ways more useful to them than just cash in hand, because the organizations are so strapped for infrastructure support. So field building grants plus technical assistance plus unrestricted grants is where you get to actual stability. And as a trust-based funder, we're trying to make sure we are providing resources beyond the check. Whether you all are in trust-based entities or not, or just working in the field, we encourage you to think about the ways beyond the check that you can support these organizations' sustainability. But the last bit is the trickiest piece. We're asking that this room, the folks in this room and beyond who will eventually see this, consider the ways that you can protect this ecosystem. Our members are confronting a twin threat right now. The first is a lack of visibility in the film industry and a lack of visibility to philanthropy. The second is the problem of visibility in a moment in which their work makes them a target. So the fact that we are offering a list of all of our organizations and who they serve and where, we're making it password protected for a reason. We have to protect their work in this moment, and we're learning every day more and more why we need to do that. We know that what makes our members so effective is that they have an analysis around the racial and gendered barriers to a filmmaker of color's career, and they've created an intervention to specifically address those barriers. The fact that they are clear about that analysis and they are clear about who they are serving makes them the most vulnerable of other organizations that are serving broader filmmaking publics. It is specifically their specificity that makes them vulnerable. And I want to speak specifically about the threats that we're seeing from our vantage point. And we know folks of you are having these conversations as well. You may know more than us for sure. But what we're tracking right now is the actions of Ted Cruz. We're tracking the actions of Edward Blum. We're tracking the actions of Stephen Miller to defund public media, to prevent nonprofits and other institutions from offering racially centered programs, and dismantling DEI programs in the commercial sector. It's really clear that media is a battleground to upend racial progress and to limit narratives of pluralism and democracy from taking root. We are equally aware that our ecosystem is not prepared to manage legal threats. Our ecosystem is not prepared to manage a decrease of philanthropic support in this moment. They cannot weather it. They are already stretched and stressed. This will close organizations down, potentially. They are particularly vulnerable also because of who is leading most of these organizations and who they serve. We could see and envision the value of a dedicated legal fund or support for communication strategies for organizations that have already been visited by some of these legal challenges. But most importantly, we're asking you, our colleagues in our sector, to think together and have conversations together about a proactive strategy to protect our organizations before more of them get visited on the door, more of these threats come and visit them on their doorsteps. So we have a powerful group of folks in the room today. You all are the right people to be thinking about this. We're asking, if you're having these conversations, please invite us in. We want to have these conversations with you. If not, we're happy to convene those conversations and get them going. So with that, we're done with our presentation.